Hello, and welcome back to Doctor Who, The Cancelled Chronicles. Today we will be focusing on Rowan Atkinson's final 2 seasons of Doctor Who, which includes the 30th anniversary season of the show and its 30th anniversary special. Let's get started. In 1993, Jonathan Powell finally stepped down as controller for BBC One and was replaced by Alan Yentub. Yentub didn't have an overwhelming hatred of the show like Powell and saw the importance of it, so he was more than ready to keep it going. The story count this season went from 7 to 8, with the 8th serving as the 30th anniversary special. It was originally going to be a 2-hour television movie, but with the show already stretching a small budget, it was decided that it would be a 3-part serial to end the season, somewhat akin to The Three Doctors, although that was at the beginning rather than the end. And only for the special, each episode would be 35 minutes rather than the regular 25 minutes. There would be a lot of production problems in regards to what actors were going to come back and what the story would be. The biggest one that was being shopped around was Lost in the Dark Dimension, but it proved to be too expensive, as well as John Pertwee and Colin Baker not inclined to come back if the BBC optioned for it, with their parts being considered too small, with Tom Baker getting most of the screen time. Destination Holocaust was another, but it was not well liked either, and would eventually be made into a novel. What was eventually chosen was simply a generic adventure with anachronisms in time featuring popular villains. With this, all Living Doctor actors decided to come back, with Peter Davison coming back for an additional story right before to lead into the special. With all of that out of the way, the rest of the season was planned fairly easily with a mix of original stories and stories featuring popular villains, as well as the BBC boosting the episode count from 18 to 20, Gary Beadle announcing that season 30 would be his final season, and a new companion, played by Claire King, would be introduced in the second story of the series. The first story is Elysium, written by Ben Aronovich. The Doctor and Chris deliver Rain's soul to the afterlife of the Elysium, and he feels that there is a dark presence there threatening to destroy the planet. This story would follow the Doctor and Chris almost exactly at the point where we left them in The Discovery of Witches. The Doctor states that there is a place called the Elysium that is sort of a controlled afterlife where Rain can almost live until she decides to no longer do so. Her brain would be wired into this big machine, and she would experience life's greatest loves. Wanting Rain to properly live as much of her life as she can, Chris agrees. When they get to the planet, everything seems to be okay, until there is a planet-wide shutdown due to an otherworldly threat. It's because of this the Doctor and Chris must deal with that first. They eventually do so over the course of the episodes, and eventually Rain is uploaded into this giant machine. Through special visiting means, the Doctor and Chris say their goodbyes to Rain, with Rain leaving behind a recording for her father, which the Doctor and Chris deliver. However, we never find out what she actually says to him once they drop it off. The Doctor and Chris leave in the TARDIS for their next adventure. The story would receive a decent amount of praise, showcasing 8's love for his companions and his softer side. The Doctor and Chris saying goodbye to Rain would have been declared one of the best companion leaving scenes in the show's history, as well as the story being a good balance of fun and tragic, and the villain's plan showcasing the possible problems of doing this to people, and has good themes in regards to the afterlife and life support. The second story is Memory of the Autons, written by Steve Lyons. A woman goes undercover as an Auton on an alien planet in order to stop the threat, only to get her mind wiped by the Autons after she is found out. She is trying to fight the threat while figuring out who she is when she meets a man named the Doctor. This story would have featured a new companion named Sierra, played by Claire King. The story would be told from her perspective, with the Doctor being a supporting character. She would have been an agent for some alien spy agency that helps people across space. Think IMF, but in space. She is assigned to go undercover as an Auton on a planet called Denaglon in the hopes of getting some more information about them, the Nestine consciousness, and hopefully stop the threat. She undergoes surgery to trick the Nestine to think she is one of them, and is applied with various prosthetics to help her blend in further. Some weeks later, she is eventually found out, and her memory is wiped, and the only things we know about her is all the info pertaining to this story only. So we are as in the dark as she is. Eventually, the Doctor and Chris would come down to the planet in the hopes of stopping the threat, and they eventually come across Sierra, and with her help, they eventually stop the Nestine and the Auton threat. Chris takes pity on Sierra, and throughout the story tries to convince the Doctor to help her with her memory, and have her come aboard the TARDIS, but he is adamant against it, still grief-stricken over Rain's death. However, eventually, when everything is said and done, he begrudgingly invites her along, and they all leave together. There is a scene after this with one of her comrades wondering what happened to her, and her superior officer declaring her MIA. The story would have received a lot of praise and considered one of the best companion introduction stories. Many liked the idea of showing everything through Sierra's eyes, as well as showcasing a darker side to the Doctor after now fully dealing with the death of Rain, as well as Chris almost taking center stage by showing how he deals with the loss and finding solace in Sierra and connecting with her, ultimately leading to his decision to bring her aboard the TARDIS, as well as the return of the Autons also getting praised. The third story is The Dunes of Time, written by Mark Gatiss. The Doctor, Chris, and Sierra go to a planet where everyone dies mysteriously after 6 hours on the dot. It is soon revealed that the Dunes of Time keep repeating the same 6 hours over and over and over again, with the same disastrous results. The second one-episode story ever featured in Doctor Who, after Mission to the Unknown, and it also doesn't have anything to do with the Sands of Time either, just a coincidence that they sound similar. This is sort of a ticking clock story. The Doctor is researching the planet and realizes that something is wrong, stating that everything permanently dies after 6 hours. But the 6 hours itself repeats over and over again, with the subjects in question not coming back. They are then eventually pulled to the planet, with the TARDIS being stuck, and the entire episode is pretty much the Doctor trying to figure this out before the 6 hours is up. He eventually finds out that it was, in fact, the Ronnie doing a time experiment. The Doctor undoes whatever she's doing and now can leave the planet, while the Doctor traps her in her own looping technology. He gets back to the TARDIS and leaves without another word to his companions, who are shocked with what he has done. The story would have received mixed reception. While some like the ticking clock story, the Doctor being darker, and the Ronnie being featured again, with Kate O'Mara being praised, some felt it was way too rushed for a one-episode story and that the mystery wasn't incredibly engaging. The fourth story is Genesis of the Cybermen, written by Kate Orman. The Doctor and company land on early Mondus after it split from orbit from Earth. The hopeful yet naive King Dega tries to save his species by giving them robotic enhancements, which would eventually become Cybermen. This would have essentially been the original idea for a Cybermen origin story, with Genesis of the Cybermen by Jerry Davis mixed with Mark Platt's spare parts. Kate Orman would have done most of the writing, while Mark Platt did some necessary rewrites in-universe. King Dega would have been seen as a tragic figure just wanting his people to survive, only to realize too late that he was killing them and then being taken over by something much more nefarious. It would have had the basic concept of the original story, but included the much darker aspects and character-driven moments of spare parts. Eventually, at the Part 3 cliffhanger, it is revealed that Chris has been converted into a Cyberman. At the end, with the last bit of humanity he has left, Chris sacrifices himself to save the Doctor and Sierra and destroy the Cybermen threat. But the Doctor knows that it would all be for nothing because the Cybermen will come back in 1986. The story would have been massively praised and arguably considered the 8th Doctor's best story. All the character moments between the Doctor, Chris, and Sierra were described as the best and were genuine. The performances were gut-wrenching and emotional, the story being properly dark, and for the first time in a long time, showed the proper horror of the Cybermen. Dega was a complicated figure, and it would have split the fanbase on whether or not he was a tragic figure or a true villain. The fifth story is Shadow Play, written by Andrew Hunt. The Doctor is in an oddly chipper mood, despite losing 2 companions almost back-to-back. He soon figures out that Sierra is from modern Earth, and he takes her there in the hopes that she possibly regains some memories, and so the Doctor can visit his favorite planet. They soon see that strange shadow-like beings have taken over modern London, and for some reason, the Doctor assumes them to be dead loved ones. This would have been a simple story and somewhat reminiscent of Army of Ghosts, but not quite. The TARDIS crew come down to Earth and slowly start to realize that there are these weird shadow beings that aren't attached to people. The Doctor thinks they are dead loved ones, and as he theorizes that they are, quote, shadows with no accompanying body, end quote, and that the bodies have somehow died but their shadows still walk about. It turns out to be an alien that the Doctor names the Shadow King, and that he was simply doing this because he was bored. He wanted to invade the Earth with his shadows, which is revealed to be a tool that manipulates shadows of objects to make them look like people. But the Doctor stops him. There is also an ongoing subplot with the Doctor and Sierra trying to regain her memories when he deduces she's from 20th century Earth. He is also using this to push his grief and regret for not saving Chris down. Towards the end of the story, the Doctor almost kills the Shadow King, but Sierra soon stops him and they go off in the TARDIS together while the Shadow King is stripped of his technology and is stuck on Earth. He tells Sierra in the TARDIS, "This is one of the many reasons why I have companions, friends, accompanying travelers. They're to remind me of what I am and stop me from becoming something else, something much darker." On that, the story ends. The story would have been praised mainly for dealing with the aftermath of Genesis of the Cybermen and showing what the Doctor could be if left unchecked, and how dark he could be, showing his character in a different way akin to the Seventh Doctor. However, the simple aspects of the story would have also been praised, as they were fun and light while dealing with the darker character aspects, and were enjoyable. The Shadow King would have been added to the pantheon of silly yet forgettable villains. The sixth story is Planet of the Zygons, written by Gareth Roberts. The Doctor and Sierra visit the Zygon planet before it is destroyed, and the Doctor wrestles with fixed points in time, as well as possibly saving a dastardly foe. The story would have had the Doctor landing on the Zygon homeworld, Zygor, before it was mysteriously destroyed. Here, the Zygons are not seen as evil, as they were in their original appearance, and so the Doctor is confronted with a major decision. Should he save the Zygons or let them perish? It doesn't help that he has been dealing with darker actions due to the trauma and grief of losing his companions. Sierra, unknowing of the original threat, tries to push the Doctor to save them, but the Doctor deals with fixed points in time that the Zygons must die in order for his past self to interact with them, or there would be a paradox that would threaten the web of time. However, the idea of saving the Zygons might mean that many people on Earth might not die, and he could possibly save them. The Doctor wrestles with this while Sierra looks on, unsure of what to do. With this, they also experience Zygor in its full capacity, and small skirmishes on the planet that they also deal with. Eventually, the Doctor ultimately decides to not save them, thinking that the balance of time is more valuable. They both leave the planet, feeling defeated. The story would have been considered good. While many liked seeing the Zygons again and liked seeing the Doctor wrestle with his actions and fixed points in time, many felt it was a bit too derivative of Genesis of the Daleks. However, Sierra did get some time to shine and having more shade of grey Zygons, as well as good ones, and it was considered an interesting dynamic. The seventh story is Cold Fusion, written by Lance Parkin. More than one TARDIS lands on a barren ice world. The Fifth Doctor and Perry Brown find a once-ordered society on the verge of collapse as rebels wage a dirty war with Scientifica, the ruling elite. All that stands between order and anarchy is the masked presence of an Agitator peacekeeping force. But is peace the only reason for the Agitator garrison? What exactly has been discovered deep below the planet's surface? Who are the mysterious Furutu? And why is telling a ghost story a criminal offense? The Fifth Doctor decides with the cause of justice and fairness as always. But as the threat to the universe unfolds, he finds himself in conflict with his past and his future. Most of the story remains the same, except the Eighth Doctor is given a bit more of a role as opposed to the Seventh in the original novel, and Tegan, Nyssa, and Adric are replaced with Perry to have it serve as a bridge for the 30th anniversary special, as well as not having it be as busy with too many companions running around. The story would have received monumental praise and would have been considered one of the best multi-Doctor stories ever. In fact, it was so good it was considered the real 30th anniversary special, similar to Remembrance of the Daleks over Silver Nemesis for the 25th. Peter Davison and Nicola Bryant fit back into their roles like they never left, and they had good chemistry with Atkinson and King, as well as the two Doctors connecting over the deaths of companions. It was an engaging story, and each companion and Doctor had their time to shine. The plot itself would have been praised and showcased the darker side of the Doctor that was bubbling to the surface this past season after the deaths of Chris and Rain. The eighth and final story, as well as the 30th anniversary special, is The Six Doctors, written by Ben Aronovich. A team of two of each Doctor must team up and stop various anachronisms across time. After the events of the previous story, and both 8 and 5 getting a call back to Gallifrey, they are then greeted by the current president, who tells them that due to various space-time anomalies, various villains have disrupted Earth history, and that they must send 2 Doctors to deal with each threat. 3 and 4 must go to the Titanic, where a tribe of sea devils have invaded. 5 and 6 must go to ancient Egypt, where the Daleks are being worshipped like gods. And finally, 7 and 8 must go to modern-day London, where Roran have infected the food supply and are turning everyone into them. Eventually, the day is saved and the anachronisms are stopped. Each Doctor is sent back to their own time and place and gives each other a final farewell. Before the story ends, though, the first and second Doctor also give them a goodbye, but are not shown on screen. The story would have been the outlier of a great season, as it left a lot to be desired. While the stories were fun and the interactions with various Doctors were praised, mainly the bickering of 5 and 6, it didn't do anything new or interesting and was simply what we saw before. However, the posthumous voice cameos from the first and second Doctors were appreciated, but not considered a great special by many fans. The 30th season would have been considered the best of the 8th Doctor's run so far, despite a lackluster 30th anniversary special. It would have gotten darker as Yenta allowed for more experimentation with the series, and despite Downey still favoring the more kids show aesthetic, he wasn't locked into that certain aspect by the higher powers at the BBC, so even he was a bit more accepting of the darker aspects that Aronovich wanted. Now we move on to Rowan Atkinson's final season as the Doctor. Despite reaching a major high in Doctor Who last season, Atkinson decided that season 51 would be his last, following McCoy's example of 4 seasons. With this, there was a slight push for more higher concept stories, darker themes, and somewhat of an ongoing story arc in regards to the Doctor's death. Another 2 episodes were awarded to the series, as well, sort of following suit from last season by adding an 8th story. Outside of that, the series would stay the same. The first story is Unending Night, written by Russell T. Davies. The Doctor and Sierra reach a planet where it's only dark for 30 minutes out of the entire year. When that half hour steadily approaches, the Doctor and Sierra uncover a dastardly conspiracy to make it Unending Night. This story would be about the Doctor and Sierra landing on a somewhat primitive world with some advanced technologies here and there. They eventually come across a local who tells them that soon there will no longer be any light in the sky. The Doctor tries to get them to explain, but they run away. They eventually come across this big, multi-purpose building where they meet a man named Reese. He explains to them that there will be the absence of light for a limited time. The Doctor then realizes that he is talking about nighttime. Sierra soon becomes bored with the world and runs off to find the TARDIS. The Doctor tries to stop her, but she won't listen. Soon she finds some kind of group that talks about making it night forever. The next episode starts with the Doctor wandering around to try and find Sierra, only for him to be knocked out. After she leaves, the group, known as the Brotherhood, know that she was watching them. She starts looking for clues while the Doctor tries to get out of the location he is in. She eventually finds a hidden staircase in the multi-purpose building and soon sees visions of what will happen when it becomes permanently nighttime. She eventually finds a machine, and before she can do anything, she herself is knocked out and wakes up next to the Doctor. They eventually both get out of the hidden room and make their way back to the machine that Sierra has told the Doctor about. They eventually find the hidden staircase and both begin to experience the visions from before. They eventually find the Brotherhood and the machine again, and the Doctor tries to convince him that the world isn't ready for permanent nighttime, and Reese agrees. He states the machine cannot make it night forever, as that would be impossible. Just have everyone experience a psychic link where they perceive it to be nighttime. Reese states the reason that they were so protective of the machine is because it was simply too much to explain, and they didn't want to risk the Doctor and Sierra destroying it or telling anyone about it. While the Doctor doesn't agree with the plan, he cannot mess with the planet's evolutionary progress. They soon leave. When they get back to the TARDIS, Sierra asks the Doctor about the visions, and the Doctor states his theory that due to the fact that they are connected to the TARDIS, as well as in combination with the psychic machine, it was showing a sign of what is to come. They soon dematerialize. The story would have been majorly praised. Its story, ideas, and intrigue would have been major positives, as well as Davies being influenced by Isaac Asimov's Nightfall. Some felt it could have been longer, but most agree that it was the best season opener since Remembrance of the Daleks. The second story is A Nefarious Tale, written by Rona Munro. Something is revealed to the Doctor, a dark nefarious secret, when the Time Lord is destined to die. Is it true, or is somebody pulling a terrible trick? The Doctor and Sierra are in the TARDIS and realize that it has been infiltrated by an unseen force. The Doctor begins to almost have a seizure while getting strange visions from another place in time. He soon realizes that somebody has shown him his death. Throughout the episode, he tries to figure out if this is real or a trick, thinking of various experiences that could have caused this. Maybe the TARDIS is even doing this for some reason. By the end of the episode, it is revealed that the Great Intelligence had been hiding out in the TARDIS since a previous adventure that wasn't shown on screen, and showcasing his death to scare the Doctor. He thinks this is a trick, but the Great Intelligence reveals the greatest pleasure of all. It's all totally real. The Doctor then expels the Great Intelligence from the TARDIS, and the episode ends with the Doctor being scared of what is to come, but he does not tell Sierra. This story would have been criticized for being somewhat boring and very unnecessary, especially with such a recognizable villain being forced into the story. Apparently, Aronovich forced Rona Munro to put all these elements into the story to sort of have a final story arc for Atkinson's final season, which resulted in a lackluster story where its sole existence is to be filler and start a subplot. Some liked some aspects and liked seeing the Great Intelligence again, but felt that the story was unnecessary and they could have introduced the subplot much better and much more organically. The third story is Shadow Mind, written by Christopher Bulis. Arden, a planet of hills and streams and forests. Peaceful, friendly, but there is something on Arden, something that steals minds and memories, something that is growing stronger, something that can reach out to the regional stellar capital, Tarngare, where the newest exhibit in the sculpture park is a blue box surmounted by a flashing light. This would have pretty much been an adaptation of the book, but obviously majorly condensed, and the companions changed to just Sierra, as well as adding notes of the ongoing subplot of the Doctor knowing when he is going to die. This story would have been relatively well received. Many were fans of the creative plot and villain of the story, as well as the Doctor and Sierra's roles in the unfolding of the story. However, some felt that the story could have been longer to handle its higher concept ideas, and felt that at points the story felt a bit generic and could have been better. The fourth story is Birthright, written by Nigel Robinson. The TARDIS has died, stranded in early 20th century London. Sierra can only stand watch as it slowly disintegrates. In the East End, a series of grisly murders has been committed. Is this the work of the ghostly Spring-Heeled Jack, or as Sierra suspects, something even more sinister? In a tiny shop in Bloomsbury, the master of a grand order of sorcerers is nearing the end of a 700-year quest for a fabled magic wand, and on a barren world in the far distant future, the queen of a dying race pleads for the help of an old hermit named Moldwitch, while a woman named Dre leads a group of guerrillas in a desperate struggle against their alien oppressors. These events are related. Perhaps the Doctor knows how, but the Doctor has gone away. It would have essentially been the novel, with necessary changes, like condensing and toning some things down. However, since both companions from the original novel play a rather big part, a new one-story companion would have been created to fit this necessary part of the story. The story would have once again been fairly well received, even more so than the last story. Despite some complaints that the Warren could have been used instead of the Charl, many felt it was a well-done story, with the Doctor having essentially no role in the plot. Dre would have been a relatively well-received character, and the story would have been considered an intriguing mystery as well as having a great setting. The fifth story is Terror from Beyond, written by Paul Cornell. The Doctor is separated from his companion when the TARDIS dematerializes after dropping him off at an old Gothic mansion where he must see what horrors await for him inside. The Doctor gets out of the TARDIS, and before Sierra can come with him, the TARDIS then dematerializes, leaving him stranded. The only thing around for miles, or should I say kilometers, is a big Gothic mansion, so the Doctor, with little else to do, goes inside. He is greeted by a big, ostentatious, and ornate-looking mansion, and starts to wander the halls. He feels like something is wrong, but isn't quite sure what. He then sees a young woman who asks for a man named Frederick and proceeds to walk through the Doctor. He then starts running around the house and sees all different people from tons of different times and places wandering the halls. The Doctor then runs to a broom closet due to the sensory overload. He then realizes after many theories where he is, and he thinks he's dying along with this place. The next episode then begins with the Doctor running out of the broom closet, and he forgets what he figures out, and he begins to go along with a party that has started. He gets enraptured in the festivities while he sees and hears Sierra screaming for him. He finally remembers who he is and why he's there. He tries to find a quiet place to think, trying to remember what he forgot. He starts going further and further into the mansion, with the wallpaper now turning into big orange circles, and noticing that there aren't any windows. He then sees all the people he failed. Katarina, Sarah, Adric, Chameleon, and then finally, Rain and Chris. They start screaming at him. Why did he let them die? He then screams to the heavens, "No! I'm not going to let you win!" He runs through them, finally remembering what he figured out. He then goes deeper, down and down into the mansion, and it starts to look like some sort of spaceship. It is then revealed that it is, in fact, a dying TARDIS. He goes down, and it looks like the machinery of an old spaceship with very dim lights and almost labored breathing in the background. There is then a montage of what could be days, possibly weeks, of the Doctor fixing this TARDIS. The TARDIS tries to force him to stop, wanting to die in peace, but he refuses to let it. Eventually, the Doctor gets a piece of machinery in the right spot, and it soon comes to life. The Doctor then starts walking up and back through the mansion, which slowly starts to turn back into the familiar look of the console room, although slightly different. He asks if everything is okay now, and the TARDIS makes a certain noise, and the Doctor grins. He then flicks the switch, leaves, and the TARDIS dematerializes. Then his own TARDIS reappears, and despite a stern talking to, is happy they're back. He goes inside and asks Sierra if everything is okay. She states, "You don't want to know." And the story ends. The story would have been praised with the simple story nailing some slightly higher concept, as well as lore being introduced about TARDISes. Atkinson would have been praised for pretty much working by himself, albeit with some silly melodrama. The sixth story is The Dimension Riders, written by Daniel Blythe. Abandoning a holiday in Oxford, the Doctor travels to Space Station Q4, where something is seriously wrong. Ghostly soldiers from the future watch from the shadows among the dead. Soon the Doctor is trapped in the past. Sarah is fighting for her life, but is also somehow uncovering deceit among the college cloisters. What is the connection with a beautiful assassin in a black sports car? How can the Doctor's time machine be in Oxford when it is on board the space station? And what secrets are held by the library of the invaded TARDIS? The Doctor quickly discovers he is facing another time-shattering enigma, a creature which he thought he had destroyed, in which it seems he is powerless to stop. This story would have been an adaptation of the novel, but majorly condensed and some darker themes toned down. Due to the lack of another companion, Sierra would be in two places at once, adding to the mystery of the main story. This story would have been considered one of the weaker ones of the season. Many fans complained it was essentially a ripoff of the incomplete Tom Baker story, Shada, but lacked the wit of Adams' original story. It was considered more traditional and not as experimental as the other stories in the season, and not nearly as interesting. The seventh story is History of the Daleks, written by Ben Aronovich. The Daleks have invaded almost every major facet of Earth history at the same time, and the Doctor must figure out a way to stop it. This story would have essentially been the big epic final battle between the Eighth Doctor and the Daleks, more specifically the Renegade Daleks. They would have invaded many facets of human history to change the course so that the Daleks will reign supreme of Earth to not only spite the Doctor, but to conquer the entire galaxy in the future with no humans to stop them. Many parts of history would be included, mainly with wars, so that they could go to the Daleks' favor, like the Revolutionary War, both World Wars, the Crimean War, many of the Crusades, many civil wars, not just the American Civil War, and so on and so forth. While not all of these would be showcased on screen, they would be showcased when the Doctor sees them on his screen in the TARDIS before the adventure. The main ones that the story would focus on are ones that haven't been showcased on Doctor Who before, like the Revolutionary War and the Crimean War. Eventually, to end the Daleks' reign on Earth, the Doctor would use an unorthodox method from Time Lord history. Maybe a device or creature of some sort to stop the Daleks and destroy them before time takes shape. After doing so, he realizes that he has gone too far and must face his death on Tursurus. This would have been praised for its epic scale and overall story. While many claimed it jumped around a bit too much, fans appreciated the scale and at times felt almost like a movie, as well as adding to the Doctor's darker arc this season and the cliffhanger with his impending death and regeneration. The eighth and final story is The Curse of Fatal Death, written by Stephen Moffat. The Doctor and Sarah land on Tursurus, where the Doctor is destined to die. The Doctor ultimately decides not to live in fear and faces his fate head on. But is he ready for what awaits him on Tursurus? Obviously, this would be incredibly different from the story we got that was a parody/tribute to Doctor Who rather than an actual story. So many things would change. First off, since the Ronnie was essentially the Eighth Doctor's main antagonist in a way, she would be the main villain of the story instead of the Master. Obviously, 8 would only die once and not 4 times throughout the story. Then, no Dalek cameo, obviously. No jokes, none of that. Essentially, the only things that carry over are that Stephen Moffat is the writer, a renegade Time Lord is the main villain, some of it takes place in a ruined castle, and the main setting is the planet Tursurus, and that's it. So it carries over from the last story with the Doctor finally facing his fears and landing on the planet, where the only thing left on the relatively barren world is a ruined castle. Due to the events of Terror from Beyond, the Doctor assumes it is another dying TARDIS, and he is incorrect as he scans it. The Doctor then goes outside and locks Sierra in the TARDIS so that nothing will happen to her. The Doctor explores the barren castle while Sierra tries her hardest to get out, and that is essentially the first episode. The cliffhanger at the end of the episode reveals that the Rani is there, but she is an old woman. It is revealed in the next episode that the Rani stayed in her time loop for over 5,000 years before managing to figure a way out. Now that she's permanently dying, she landed on this world which used to be lush and beautiful, but due to her rampant experiments to try and harness raw temporal energy, she essentially killed the world. This brings out the Doctor's rage, stating that from what he remembers, the people on this planet used to be beautiful and ahead of the universe, and because of her hubris, she had to destroy it. The rest of the episode would involve the Doctor trapping the Rani in some sort of spatial trap and only realizes that the device to help her prolong her life has just started to go off. Sierra would be going through the depths of the TARDIS to try and help the Doctor and mainly get out. Through this, she also regained some of her memory. The next episode would be very epic in scale, as an invading force from Gallifrey has arrived on Terceris to stop the Rani's experiments, as they were alerted by the Doctor's TARDIS. The Doctor would happen upon the device while he is found by Gallifreyan guards trying to take the Rani in. He tries to plead with the guards to try and help him stop this device, but they say that that doesn't matter, they only need to bring the Rani in. While some do try and help, they are then forced to leave by the commander, even though the Doctor states that this could destroy the entire galaxy. They ignore him. While trying to take the Rani away, all of a sudden hands start bursting from the ground, and the old race, now the undead, that used to be on Terceris, try to fight back against the soldiers, and the Rani tries to escape to her device. Sierra eventually manages to find some sort of device within the bowels of the TARDIS, and she uses that to escape. She manages to get her way past the battlefield and makes her way to the Doctor. He soon realizes that he can't stop it, and the Doctor sees Sierra come in and simply says, "I'm sorry." Episode ends. The final episode involves sort of a flashback to a couple minutes before the end of the episode, and he finds some of the Rani's equipment. He uses it to create some sort of armor. That's when Sierra comes in. The Doctor manages to focus the entire energy of the temporal device into him and the Rani's TARDIS, effectively destroying it and him. Eventually, the Gallifreyan soldiers defeat the Tercerians, while the Rani comes in a bit too late to find the machine now destroyed. She's wailing with anger when the commander then brings her in, and the last we see of her, she is screaming down a hall. Sierra finds the Doctor, who is unconscious. He soon awakens and seems to be okay, but he tells her that he is going away soon. But there's one last thing that this incarnation can do. So they manage to go into the TARDIS and go back in time before the Rani got there. He tells the leaders of the world that she is coming and that they need to prepare. They thank him and they soon leave. However, the Doctor realizes that he can't hold on for much longer and falls to the ground before they can get into the TARDIS. He tells Sierra that everything is going to be alright. She just needs to be there for him because he's going to look different and be very confused. He might even have amnesia, just like herself. Sierra sheds a tear and the Doctor chuckles slightly. He turns towards Sierra, saying nothing, his eyes telling the whole story, looking at the audience and his companion. The Doctor would throw the audience one final wink before giving them one last smile before regenerating. He then regenerates into the 9th Doctor. We see a flock of hair curl and darken. A young noble brow replaces that of Rowan Atkinson. The figure jolts up, panning around, and we see the new Doctor, Paul McGann. "Excuse me, miss, but I appear to have misplaced my name. Would you help me find it?" And then the episode ends. The story would have been very much praised, however some felt that the story was an episode too long and was stretched a bit too thin. However, the performances of Atkinson and King were very much praised, as well as Kate O'Mara as the Rani. The epic scale, but still smaller and more personal moments of the story were also praised. While Season 30 would have overall been the better received season, the ratings were still climbing, and many fans loved the direction that the series was going, and were very excited for the next Doctor in Paul McGann, despite being considered a bit too pretty for the role. Downey announced that Season 32 would be his final season, but had yet to name a successor. And Ben Aronovich announced that Season 31 would be his final season, and that Kate Orman would be his successor. Many fans were outraged that a non-Brit was being utilized as script editor, while at the same time, many fans were open to the idea due to her great stories. So that is all for this video. Next, we will be covering the first 2 series of the 9th Doctor's run. But for right now, we here at Doctor Who The Cancelled Chronicles wish you a very happy new year and hope you had a very Merry Christmas. See you all in 2023. Oh, as well as a happy Hanukkah and happy Kwanzaa. Sorry.